$9 billion. In 2014, that was the paper valuation of Theranos. On the cap table, it looked like the future of medicine. Then came the morning of October 15, 2015. One headline in the Wall Street Journal turned the liquidity tap off. Reporter John Carreyrou didn't look at the vision, he looked at the data. And the data suggested the Edison machine was a myth. Valuation is a story investors tell themselves. When the story broke, the math took over. The asset wasn't distressed, it was non-existent. CEO Elizabeth Holmes went on television. She called it a trade secret dispute. The market calls it damage control. The pitch was elegant. 200 diagnostic tests from a single finger prick. No needles, no pain, pure efficiency. According to later SEC filings, the proprietary machine could only reliably perform about 15 tests. The gap was bridged by silence. To fulfill orders, the lab secretly ran samples on standard Siemens analyzers. They bought the competition's hardware to simulate their own innovation. How does a $9 billion gap go unnoticed? Simple. Silicon Valley traded due diligence for fear of missing out. To understand the liquidation, we have to audit the origination. Let's go back to the seed round, 2003. A 19-year-old chemical engineering student leaves Stanford. She cashes out her tuition fund to seed a venture. The thesis wasn't just biochemical, it was psychological. Nobody likes needles. It was a market inefficiency waiting to be solved. Stanford professor Phyllis Gardner warned her. The physics of microfluidics made the idea impossible. The warning was treated as noise. Yet Dean Channing Robertson backed the play. His reputation became the company's first tangible asset. Theranos entered stealth mode. In finance, secrecy usually protects IP. Here, it protected the lack of it. Holmes modeled her persona on Steve Jobs, black turtlenecks, reality distortion fields. She wasn't selling healthcare, she was selling a gadget. By December 2004, she had raised $6 million. The valuation hit $30 million. The product was still a prototype. She bypassed skeptical biotech funds. She targeted family offices, high net worth, low scientific literacy. Internally, teams were siloed. The chemists couldn't talk to the engineers. Information flow was asphyxiated by NDAs. But a prototype doesn't pay the burn rate. To reach the billion-dollar club, they needed heavyweights. George Shultz, Henry Kissinger. The board list read like a State Department roster. They provided credibility, not oversight. They pitched General James Mattis on battlefield usage. The military did their due diligence and passed. The board ignored the military. Enter Ramesh Balwani. He guaranteed a $12 million line of credit. He bought his way into the role of president. Balwani enforced the culture, surveillance, intimidation. Anyone questioning the physics was marginalized or terminated. Then the whale, Walgreens. They invested $140 million to put Theranos centers in every drugstore in America. Internal documents show Walgreens consultants requested a lab inspection. Holmes refused. Walgreens, afraid to lose the deal, signed anyway. Safeway followed. They spent $350 million renovating stores for clinics that would never open. The sunk costs were piling up. Rupert Murdoch wired over $100 million. The audit committee was effectively asleep at the wheel. 2013, Theranos went live in Arizona. Real patients, real blood. The simulation became a clinical reality. Cash burned on legal fees and marketing. They were selling a healthcare experience, not a medical device. Holmes held up the nanotainer at conferences, a prop, the defining image of a specialized asset that didn't work. They lobbied Arizona legislature to allow patients to order tests without a doctor. They changed the law to fit the business model. The cap table swelled. At $9 billion, Holmes' 50% stake made her the richest self-made woman in America, on paper. It was the perfect unicorn, a female founder, a world-changing mission. The venture capital echo chamber amplified the signal. Hedge funds like Partner Fund Management poured in $96 million. They relied on the Goldman Sachs-style binders Theranos provided. Those binders contained reports with Pfizer logos. Pfizer later testified they never endorsed the technology. That is forgery. The burn rate funded private jets and a security detail rivaling the Secret Service. The appearance of success required capital. Inside, the turnover was high. Scientists who asked, "Where is the data?" were replaced by yes men who asked, "Where is the bonus?" Chief scientist Ian Gibbons knew the chemistry was failing. Pressed to testify in a patent lawsuit, the pressure became fatal.
With the labs live and the tech failing, the strategy shifted from research and development to bait and switch. The Edison machines couldn't handle the blood volume, so they diluted the samples, like watering down wine to serve more guests. They hacked commercial Siemens analyzers to run these diluted samples, a violation of the manufacturer's protocols. Dilution destroys accuracy. Potassium levels spiked, cancer markers drifted. The data wasn't just noisy, it was dangerous. Tyler Schultz, grandson of board member George Schultz, worked in the lab. He saw the quality control checks failing daily. Schultz emailed Holmes directly. The reply came from Balwani. It was aggressive, dismissive, and legalistic. Erica Chung, another lab associate, refused to run patient samples on failing machines. She resigned rather than commit malpractice. Regulators from CMS arrived. Theranos blocked access to the room with the Siemens machines. They showed them the dummy lab. In investor demos, the machine would say, processing. In reality, it was running a pre-programmed loop. The result was hard-coded. Doctors in Phoenix started seeing impossible results, healthy patients flagging for heart attacks. The feedback loop was closing. A medical expert tipped off John Carreyrou. He started calling. Theranos responded with legal threats, not lab reports. Attorney David Boies was on the board and on the payroll. He used litigation as a weapon to silence sources. Holmes went to Rupert Murdoch, the owner of the Wall Street Journal. She wanted the story killed. Murdoch, to his credit, declined to intervene. October 2015, the article runs. The trade secret defense crumbled under the weight of forensic journalism. The aftermath was statistical carnage. Theranos had to void or correct tens of thousands of blood test results. 2 years of data erased. When you void the product, you void the revenue. And when you void the revenue, the Department of Justice opens a file. June 2016, Walgreens terminates the partnership. They sued for $140 million. The commercial lifeline was cut. Forbes revived Elizabeth Holmes' net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. Equity in a fraud is worth exactly what you paid for it. March 2018, the SEC charged Holmes and Balwani with massive fraud. Holmes settled, losing control of the company. June 2018, the U.S. Attorney's Office indicted them. Wire fraud, conspiracy. The charge wasn't bad management, it was theft. September 2018, Theranos formally dissolved. Creditors picked over the carcass. The patents were just expensive wallpaper. The trial began in 2021. Holmes' defense? She was a visionary who failed, manipulated by Balwani, the Svengali offense. Prosecutors focused on the paper trail, the forged Pfizer logos, the inflated revenue projections, the emails denying lab access. January 3, 2022, the jury returned the verdict. Guilty on 4 counts, 3 of wire fraud, 1 of conspiracy. Note the distinction. She was convicted of defrauding investors, but acquitted of defrauding patients. The money mattered more than the medicine. July 2022, Sunny Balwani's trial concluded. Guilty on all 12 counts. The enforcer took the harder fall. Judge Edmund Davila handed down the sentence, 135 months, 11 1/4 years in federal prison. Balwani got nearly 13 years, the cost of running the operations of a conspiracy. The court ordered $452 million in restitution. Rupert Murdoch gets his money back on paper. In reality, the coffers are empty. May 2023, Elizabeth Holmes reported to a federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas. The black turtlenecks replaced by khaki. The ledger is closed, the corporation is dead, but the mechanism that created it is still running. Theranos wasn't a sophisticated scam. It was a failure of basic auditing. Investors trusted the person, not the product. When the fear of missing out outweighs the fear of losing capital, due diligence becomes an obstacle to the deal. In software, you can ship buggy code and patch it later. In medicine, buggy code kills people. Holmes confused the two industries. The collateral damage, a decade of skepticism for legitimate female founders in biotech. The shadow of Theranos is long. The board of directors proved that fame is not competence. Governance requires asking the hard questions, not just cashing the checks. Only the lower-level employees, Schultz and Chung, respected the science enough to sacrifice their careers for it. $900 million in raised capital, vaporized, transferred from the wealthy to lawyers, consultants, and the void. She wasn't a genius. She was a salesperson who closed the deal but couldn't deliver the goods. The market has a short memory. A new Theranos is likely pitching a boardroom right now. The slide deck looks perfect. Trust is an asset, but verification is the only currency that matters.